Hi, this is Tracy with Tracy's Easy Eats. I'm going to talk about something a little different right now, which is not exactly related to easy eating, and that's related to two diseases that I deal with, which are Lyme disease and mold illness. And what I wanted to talk to you about is why and how I eat plant-based to deal with these diseases, and also my recommendations for people who are interested in eating plant-based, to either who have these diseases and just want to be plant-based, or who want to use a plant-based eating style as a treatment option for these diseases. So first of all, I'm trying to be real brief here. I wanted to explain what Lyme disease and mold illness are, because a lot of people probably just know about, maybe you've heard about them, and but really don't know exactly what they are. I didn't. Lyme disease is actually a cluster of diseases that come from either a tick bite, or can also come, as we're learning now, from various insect bites and spider bites. So it can be passed through a mosquito, a bed bug, a spider, but usually it's associated with tick bites. Not all tick bites are going to pass Lyme disease to somebody, but some of them do, and it's becoming more prevalent of a issue lately. I think it's growing. I believe that I contracted Lyme disease when I was 15, so I'm 51 right now, so that's 36 years ago. I don't know how I got it. I didn't get a bullseye rash like most people talk about with Lyme disease, or at least I didn't. If I got one, I didn't know that I had one. I don't remember getting one. And that's one thing I want to explain, is that it's very common, especially in the medical community, to believe that you have to have a bullseye rash to indicate that a bite that you've had is carrying Lyme disease, but that's not true. A large proportion of the people who have Lyme disease don't remember having a bullseye rash like me. And what Lyme disease is, it's one type of bacterium called Borrelia, but in actuality, people who have Borrelia from a bite usually have a number of other diseases that came with the Borrelia in that one bite. So some other ones, some that I have, are called Bartonella, which is another type of bacteria, and Babesia, which is a protozoan related to malaria. And I actually have several species of Bartonella and Borrelia. And unfortunately, all these three start with a B, and so when I first learned about this, I was mixing them all up, and I think I sometimes still do. But there's other diseases that come with this too. And then some people believe that you get viruses in addition to the bacteria and protozoa. So it's complicated. It's not just one disease, it's a cluster. The symptoms of Lyme disease are so varied because it's, number one, you can get a variety of types of diseases and species of those diseases, and it's different for different people. And your biology, your stress level, your DNA, everything combines to sort of decide how this is going to affect you. And so when someone has Lyme disease, their symptoms can be very different from somebody else who has Lyme disease. Some people talk about neuro-Lyme disease, which is where the Lyme disease seems to be focused neurologically, so in your brain. And people with that will experience a lot of brain fog, rages, like emotional instability. They may slur their speech, things like that. They'll have headaches, migraines. Then there's a more connective tissue related Lyme disease, which is more what I have, where you'll feel it more in your joints. So you'll feel more like you have arthritis. Kids tend to feel it in their knees first, which is what happened to me. My knees started hurting when I was 15. I get it in my fingers and my toes, and my sinuses. There's connective tissue right here. So I felt it in there too. And then a lot of times you'll have gut symptoms. Lyme disease, the number of symptoms is overwhelming that people have. And most of those symptoms are completely invisible to everybody else, including to most tests, most of the normal tests that doctors do. A lot of people with Lyme disease, like I used to go to the doctor trying to figure out what was wrong with me, and all of my blood work would come out normal. My cholesterol looked great, and it's like, no, you're fine. You don't have an autoimmune disease. You're fine. And they didn't know what I had, and they said, just go out and live your life. But my life was hard because my connective tissue was having issues, and I felt like I had arthritis. By the way, there are a lot of people who are diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, MS, and other diseases who actually don't have those diseases and have Lyme disease. Or they have a disease like that and Lyme disease. And maybe the Lyme disease helped cause that. I don't know. There's a lot of variation in what Lyme disease is and how it presents itself. You could have Lyme disease and not have any symptoms. You could have it and not have any symptoms for a decade, and then you have a stressful event, you have a pregnancy, something happens where your immune system is challenged and the Lyme disease manifests itself, and then you start having symptoms. So it presents in so many different ways, and I want to tell you that doctors are very ignorant and misinformed and misinforming about what Lyme disease is, how many people have it, how it presents, etc. So I guess that was a really long explanation. Mold illness is, I'm actually not as clear on how to define that, because there's different ways of talking about mold illness. There's mold illness that you get because your body gets, because of your genetics, and because maybe you have Lyme disease or some other disease that makes you susceptible to being sensitive to mold. You can have mold in an environment like your home or your car or your office, and it can affect you very strongly. And even a little bit of mold might affect you very strongly, whereas somebody else might not be affected. So that's one kind of mold illness, is that you're very sensitive to mold. But another kind is you actually have mold in your body, which I do. Like, I have mold in my sinuses. It's been confirmed on a CT scan and a scope by an ENT doctor. I have mold in my sinuses. Haven't figured out how to get rid of it yet. And it causes me chronic migraines. I'm currently having migraines a couple times a week. Hopefully I can get them down to once a week. It's horrible. So mold illness, I'm not really sure exactly how it's defined, whether it just means that you're sensitive to mold or that you have mold in your body, or both. I have both. So I have Lyme disease with multiple infections. I have mold illness, and that came from, we moved into our first home and didn't realize it had water damage from previously. The roof was still leaking, and it was still having issues with that. And then there was previous water damage. And so that material had mold in it previously, and the little microscopic bits of mold were coming off into the air. And those are called mycotoxins. So you'll hear the word mycotoxins in relation to homes or cars or offices, buildings that have had mold in the past, and maybe the mold isn't even growing still, but the building materials, the paperboard and everything, are still creating bits of mold in the air. And like, everyone else in your family may not be sensitive to this mold, and you might be sensitive to it. So what kinds of symptoms does that cause? A lot of varied symptoms, from headaches to brain fog. You can have trouble breathing, sinus type issues. I don't even know what all the mold symptoms are. I get so confused because I have symptoms from both. So there's that. With both of these conditions, most practitioners who specialize in these, which are very few because most doctors do not even know much about this at all, or they're misinformed about them, most of them recommend a paleo style or a keto type diet, low carb diet. So that's one way to go if you have these illnesses, and most people are advised to do that. Most books on Lyme disease advise you to do that, and mold illness, if there are any books on that yet. Yeah, there are. But there's another way. And there's a minority of people like me that go with a plant-based diet to treat Lyme disease and mold illness. I do it because my mom convinced me to go on a plant-based diet, and I just couldn't say no. Over time, I just was like, yeah, okay, let me try this thing. I don't know how other people come to it, because the communities around these diseases don't really usually promote paleo. I want to tell you why I like a plant-based diet for treating these diseases, and then my recommendations for people who are on a plant-based diet or considering a plant-based diet for these diseases. But first of all, you may not know what a plant-based diet is. It's essentially a vegan diet, and there's some differences, but it's essentially a vegan diet where you're not eating oil, or you're limiting your oil to very small amounts. You're trying to limit your sugar too, so you're not eating too much sugar, and you are trying to stay away from processed vegan foods. Like, you're trying to go more for the whole grains versus the white grains. You use like tofu rather than soy burgers that have like a textured vegetable protein. Like, you try to go more for whole foods. So it's often called a whole foods plant-based diet. But one of the main things that distinguish a plant-based diet from a vegan diet is that you really try to cut out or limit your oil. Like, and when I say oil, I mean the kind that you pour in a bottle or scoop from a container, like coconut oil, vegetable oil, and even olive oil. So you cut it out or limit it. Now, there are some plant-based diets that allow flax oil, because it's an omega-3 fatty acid and can be really useful for your health. But that's a minority of people who are on plant-based diets. Most of them really try to cut out oil. So that's the difference between a vegan and a plant-based diet, essentially. One other difference is people on plant-based diets allow themselves to eat honey usually, whereas vegans a lot of times don't. Okay, so those are those diets. Oh yeah, and a really important component of a plant-based diet that I didn't mention is you're cutting out animal products. So that's the vegan part of it. So you're not eating any type of meat, fish, poultry, so beef, pork, chicken, turkey, fish, shellfish. You totally cut those out. You also cut out eggs and dairy products, which are like milk, butter, cheese, cream, ice cream. I think I covered it pretty well. So that's a plant-based diet. So now, why do I like plant-based diet for these particular diseases? Well, first of all, a plant-based diet can keep you from getting other diseases. So if I were to go on a paleo diet or a meat-based diet, then I would have to worry about some of the diseases that are associated with eating that way. A lot of people find that autoimmune diseases can come with eating animal products. And I know that there's a diet called AIP that emphasizes that's a paleo-based diet to treat autoimmune diseases. However, I have to tell you that within the plant-based community, there are a lot of people, when they went plant-based, their autoimmune disease, if they had one, either disappeared or got dramatically reduced. So it appears that just by cutting out animal products and oils, you have a possibility of getting better from an autoimmune disease, which is phenomenal. So I don't want an autoimmune disease on top of what I already have, and that's one reason why I like a plant-based diet. Now, I say that, but actually one of the main issues with animal products is that they're associated with heart disease, type 2 diabetes, and cancer. The biggest association is with heart disease. So when people cut out animal products and oils from their diet, their heart disease risk plummets. Their cholesterol plummets. Like, everything related to heart disease dramatically improves. So if you're trying to prevent heart disease, go plant-based. There's a very, very strong association there. There's also an association with reducing type 2 diabetes, kidney disease, and cancer. So plant-based diets are awesome for disease prevention. But another good thing about them is a plant-based diet is it can be really good for your immune system. And people with Lyme disease and mold illness, those diseases basically attack our immune system, similar to what an autoimmune disease would do, which is why people with these diseases are often misclassified as misdiagnosed as having autoimmune diseases. So that they can attack your you can attack your immune system. A plant-based diet is anti-inflammatory and really helps with that. And then for me, I found when I got mold illness, I found that eating meat became difficult. My digestive system was all messed up. And so then you don't have to eat meat or dairy on a plant-based diet, so you don't have to worry about the digestive system issues that can sometimes be associated with those foods. So I think I've given you some reasons why I like plant-based diets. I think there's probably a few that I'm forgetting, but I wanted to move on to my recommendations for people who are choosing to eat plant-based as a way to deal with Lyme disease and mold illness. First of all, I have 5 recommendations, and the first one is you have to take supplements. These diseases are, they're known for messing with your supplements, with your vitamins and minerals. Like, I don't know the specific, like why they do that, but people are usually low in a lot of vitamins and minerals when they have Lyme disease and or mold illness. So it's essential that you take vitamin B12. Now, I don't know the specifics on how much to take, but I would say listen to Dr. Michael Greger, because he's sort of the expert within the plant-based community on supplements. He's considered, the person to kind of the go-to person when it comes to a lot of the science behind plant-based eating. So I like to look at his recommendations for supplements. So look at his recommendations for B12. They get updated sometimes, and they're different for different ages. I would go with a higher dose of B12 rather than a lower, because we tend to need extra supplements when we have these diseases. And anyone on a vegan or plant-based or vegetarian diet should be supplementing with B12. Absolutely, no question. You need B12. And the way that our food is processed, it just doesn't have B12 like it used to in the olden days. So we need B12, especially if you have these illnesses. Also, vitamin D seems to be very, very important for everybody, but especially for people with immune system issues and with these diseases. So get a D3 supplement. Once again, I'm not an expert on how much to use or even which types of vitamins and minerals to supplement with. I would go with Dr. Greger's recommendations. Iodine. I happen to have thyroid issues that I believe are related to Lyme disease. I have to supplement with a lot of iodine. I have like a liquid iodine supplement, and I use a lot of it. But at least get the minimum amount of iodine, either from drops that you can put in your water daily, or you can use iodized salt, or you can use a seaweed, which gets a little more complicated to figure out which one and how much. But you need iodine for sure, and most of our food doesn't really have enough of it. You got to supplement with that. I find omega-3 is probably really important for people with these illnesses. For vegans, we can use algae oil. And then if you can get some flax and chia seeds freshly ground in your diet, or some flax oil even, those are additional sources of omega-3s. Not as powerful as what you would get from algae oil or fish oil. It takes more of them to have the same benefit because they have to be converted in your body. But they can be really useful to add as well, in addition to algae oil. And then I personally take a multivitamin just to get a little bit of other stuff that I may not be getting. And there are probably other supplements that I'm deficient in. I take magnesium too. I take magnesium glycinate, like 400 milligrams a day, I think. Yeah. And I eat Brazil nuts, 2 Brazil nuts a day for selenium. So that's my personal regimen. I get a couple forms of B12 in because I don't know which kind I need. I get vitamin D, iodine, I take algae oil, I take a multivitamin, magnesium, and selenium. And those are just the basics. Like, I'm sure there's other things I'm deficient in. It's really hard to get a sense of deficiencies. I don't know the best way to do it, but as much information that you can get as to what you might be deficient in with these diseases, it's really important to supplement. So that's my first recommendation, is supplements. My second recommendation is to eat slowly. These illnesses seem to be, at least for me, and I believe for other people, tied really closely to blood sugar. And a lot of people in the plant-based community will say, well, once you get on a plant-based diet and you've been on it for a while, your blood sugar, you get good at regulating your blood sugar, and the carbs that you're eating don't really affect you negatively, and it's all fine. That is not true for me with the illnesses I have. I have to regulate my blood sugar. I do that by eating very slowly, especially foods that are high in carbs. I still eat plenty of carbs. I enjoy carbs and I eat them, but I eat them very slowly. I kind of like snack on them or bird eat them rather than eat them quickly. So this is a trick that I learned that's been extremely useful for me with these particular conditions on a plant-based diet, which is high in carbs. Number 3, consider trying one at a time to give, or both, to give up gluten and added sugar. I eat gluten and added sugar, a little bit of added sugar right now. I'm trying to go pretty low on the added sugar. Added sugar meaning things like sugar, honey, maple syrup, agave nectar, coconut sugar. Those are all forms of added sugar. And so within the Lyme disease and mold illness communities, they recommend cutting out sugar and gluten. I find it doesn't make that much of a difference whether I eat gluten or not personally, but that is something that helps a huge number of people who have these diseases, and also sugar and dairy, cutting those out. Now, if you're on a plant-based diet, no problem with dairy because you're not eating it anyway, so you're good. But consider looking into these other 2 things that tend to make symptoms worse for a lot of people who have these diseases. Number 4, listen to your body. A lot of people will tell you to eat this, eat that, this is good for you. Your body may tell you otherwise, so be very cognizant and go with what your body tells you over what somebody else tells you. So my body tells me that gluten seems to be okay for me overall, but maybe not spinach. Like when I eat spinach, it's high in oxalates. My joints tend to feel worse the next day. So I try to avoid eating too much. If I eat spinach, it's just like a few leaves. I don't put it in a smoothie anymore. And that's what I learned from listening to my body. I also learned that starch is really good for my digestive system. It combats SIBO symptoms that I was having, and it makes me happier. So I'm currently eating a lot of starch in my diet in addition to fruits and vegetables, rather than like a low-carb vegan diet. So listen to your own body over the experts, because you're the expert for your body. And the 5th piece of advice is consider, with these illnesses, I want you to look into Dr. Brooke Goldner's protocols. She and her husband, Thomas Tadlock, developed a protocol for autoimmune diseases that works phenomenally for people who have an autoimmune disease. It's like a plant-based diet on steroids for autoimmune disease. Like it just kicks autoimmune diseases to the curb. It's amazing. I tried it for Lyme disease and mold illness, and it was also very useful. It was great when I had COVID. It's great for long COVID. It's just a really good program to boost your immune system and reduce systemic inflammation. So I don't do her program anymore. It was bothering my gut. It was too hard for me in some ways. And I feel fine doing what I'm doing, eating slowly on a more of a starch-based, plant-based diet. But when I get a cold, I revert to her program because it's so good for the immune system. It just like, I don't know, it supercharges your immune system. So it's Dr. Brooke Goldner. Her program is sometimes called Goodbye Lupus. She has a technique that's kind of called hypernourishing, where you just add some vegetables and flax and chia to your diet every day and some water. So if you're like in serious pain, bedbound, brain fog, I believe that her protocol can really help. It's not easy and it takes work to learn. And the best way that I found to learn it is by joining her Facebook group. It's a wonderful group of people that can help you to learn it for free. You don't have to pay her money. You just join her Facebook group. So those are my 5 pieces of advice for people who have Lyme disease and mold illness and are trying to combat it through diet. Diet is extremely powerful for these diseases because diet affects your immune system, your digestive system, and everything so much. So I hope I've covered everything that you wanted to know. If you have questions, feel free to ask them in the comment section of this video. Please subscribe to my channel. My main thing that I teach people is how to make easy, healthy meals and snacks, or find them out in the world. saving time and everything. That's why my channel is called Tracy's Easy Eats. But I do have these diseases, and I wanted to talk to you about them because I think it can really help some people to understand them. Subscribe to my channel. It really helps me to continue to produce great content. Like my videos. I look at my videos to see if people like them, and that makes me feel happy. So until next time, keep it easy.